Dumela, Goeiemôre, Mukadi. That's how I would greet the brethren in Africa. I know that Brother Max and probably Brother Ben and Brother Ulysses, Brother Terry, Brother Clarence will probably have a little bit of knowledge of those words. Thank you very much for having me here this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity in sharing what the Dowland Road has great fellowship with in Africa. I know that my accent might be a little bit different to what you're used to. I know that Max always says, speak slow, speak slow. We tend to speak fast in Africa. That's because everything's fast in Africa. You've got to try and get out of the way. So yeah, excuse me if I speak a bit fast, but I will try and slow it down and hopefully be able to give you a bit of more insight of what's been happening in Africa and what the Dowland Road have fellowship with in Africa. As Brother Max rightly said, number one, Dowland Road was the first congregation to ever support me in Africa, and I thank you for that, because this work you're about to see is your work as much as our work and my work, and without your support and going forward, it would never be possible. We sung a song now. We're ready for the harvest, the reapers, and you're going to see the results of your harvest and your reaping in the presentation that I'm about to give you. I'm going to click that slide. I don't know if I should stand off to the side if everybody can see. Just to give you a short introduction, I have been here. One thing I've realized in America, when you say couple, you mean two. When we say couple, it could be 2 to 8. I have been here 4 times, I think. So some of you know me, some of you might not know me, but just to give you an introduction, my name is Warren Scholtz. My wife's name is Ivy. She's sitting in the audience. We have 5 children, because this was pointed out to me by Ivy when I did make this presentation. Although I'm only showing 2 of my sons, the other children are up and out of the house. So these are our 2 youngest that are with us at this time. That is Keegan and that is Josh. We're standing in front of our house in Africa. Just to give you a bit of geography so you can picture where we are. If you look at the map of Africa, if you go to the most southern tip of Africa, that's where we're living in South Africa. And I think the next slide will bring it up a bit closer, yes. We stay right in that top corner there. And the reason for that, brethren, is that it gives me access into Botswana and Zimbabwe, and that's where a lot of the work is taking place. I do have one work in South Africa, but most of my work involves traveling into Zimbabwe and into Botswana. And just to tell you about me, my aim as an evangelist and a preacher is to go into areas of Africa where there is no gospel or there's no true gospel, and to try and get people and to locate people and to teach people about God. And although we're many miles away and we're many cultures different, the Word of God is simple and everybody can worship Him as God intended. I think Brother David said this morning, it doesn't matter if we're traveling in fast cars or we're walking barefoot, which they do, a lot of it in Africa, to worship service. We are all simple. We are all there to serve our God. Some of the challenges in the work is the roads conditions. I enjoyed going out with Brother Terry yesterday. He took me to do some fishing, and I was quite surprised. I never told him this, but I also saw some of the other brothers that were with us that when they packed their vehicle, they just put the things in the back. I mean, it was, when we pack a vehicle, you've got to strap everything down, really strap it down, because it bounces around and it falls all over the place, and sometimes it breaks. So some of the challenges in the work, and one of them is especially the roads. I know when Max was going through my slide, he says, I know that road. And I don't think you can forget that road. Now, that's what you would call an asphalt. That's a road on the way to Botswana. And there's miles and miles of road like that. So to get into some of these areas, you need the right vehicle, and it takes some effort. It's not just a case of climbing onto the interstate and popping over quickly to a village. Off-road, once you get off that bad asphalt, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. So here are some of the roads into, and I'm sure Brother Max recognizes those roads, and his kidneys especially. Go to the next slide. Just to give you an idea of some of the roads that I'm traveling over regularly, I'm going to stick on the roads just to finish that section. Brethren, part of the biggest expense in going into all the world, as we read in Matthew, is the gas. We would call it petrol over there, but you guys call it gas. Our gas now costs, I did a conversion, about $6.50 per gallon. So when you're traveling 4,000 to 5,000 miles a month, you can imagine most of the money used in the work is for gas. And then when you do get to these African countries, you're crossing borders, and our border crossing, Brother Clarence took us into Mexico a couple of trips back. It was exactly 2, Clarence. And I know that border crossing was easy. You just flashed your passport, and not even. Sometimes you just traveled through. There, I know some of you, the brothers that have been with us, will realize that you can stand at a border crossing from 1 hour up to 5 hours trying to get across. And it costs money. It can cost up to $100 just to get through a border crossing. They've got all sorts of taxes. They've got all sorts of things they charge you for, carbon tax, toll tax. And so it's not easy to get into these areas. And as I said, gas is one of the biggest challenges. And then once you're in these countries, especially in Zimbabwe, is a lot more politically charged. It's ruled by a dictator, and because of the dictatorship, there's a lot of paranoia that goes on. And so when you're traveling into Zimbabwe, we can travel, the first church we get to is probably about 150 miles across the border, and it's not uncommon to pass through 10 to 14 roadblocks in that work, and it's a shakedown every single time. I know that the brothers that have traveled with me will bear witness to that. And it's not safe in Zimbabwe. Ivy travels with me in Botswana. There it's very safe, but Zimbabwe is a complete different story. There's a fine line to walk at these roadblocks. You can't be too pushy, otherwise they'll arrest you. You can't be a pushover, otherwise they'll take advantage of you. And I'm going to get to a section on the drought relief because I know that Darlin Roads participated a lot in that. And that particularly posed a big challenge for me over the last 2 years, is carrying maize on the back of a pickup through road checks. First of all, you're carrying a commodity that's worth gold over there. It's food. And then everybody's trying to shake you down. In the village with the brethren, you're generally safe. But along the roads, a few years ago, I stopped next to the road. I was attacked. I was mugged. I was stabbed. And that's all just part of it. You cannot stop next to the road. You cannot do anything. You've got to think every move, is what I'm trying to say. You've got to think about everything you're going to do. If you get a puncture, you drive on that rim until you find a safe space to change it. I've established 15 congregations over the years. And let's move on to some of the places of worship and talking about worshiping there. As I said, no matter where we are in the world, God has made worship simple. It's nice to have a building, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to have comfortable seats, but it's not a necessity to worship God. God has made worship simple. And if you went to Africa, you would see exactly the same acts of worship being participated in as you'd find here. We would sing, we'd pray, we'd do the Lord's Supper, maybe a little different, maybe under different conditions, but generally worship service is done out in the open. There are 1 or 2 congregations that have managed to build themselves. You'll see a shaded, it's made out of grass, but in general the ladies and men, but mostly the ladies in their culture would sit on the floor. On a grass mat, you can see that's a mat that's been wove out of grass, and this is us sitting having worship service. As you can see, there we're sitting under the tree. There's our Lord's table. But you can see that you can't see in this picture, it's a bit light, but there's bread in there, and we have the fruit of the vine, and we have giving, just as you would find in America. And it's simple, and it gets done. And worship service in the open poses different challenges. You know, if we're in Botswana, the wind can blow because we're in a desert. I know some of Max's experience is that the wind's blowing so badly that you can't even open your Bible because it's paging so much, and there's dust, and so you can imagine it's hot. It's as hot there as it is here, if not hotter. So there's lots of challenges, but almost all the time worship service is done in the open, and it's done with enthusiasm. It's done with nice singing. You know, if you get a chance, I know my wife's got on her phone some of the singing I recorded, brethren singing in the open, singing, and it's beautiful. You know, and there are some challenges when you're establishing a work. For instance, things that we might not normally think of is when I go into a place into Africa, all these fruit of the vine and the plates and the bread and everything, the songbooks, I have to supply. Because now you've got brethren that have got nothing. And they haven't even really got a big treasury that can go out and buy things like this. This all has to be supplied. Bibles need to be supplied. And so it makes it different when you're starting a work. I've established 15 congregations over the last years, and I work with all of them regularly still. And all these congregations needed these things. They needed to be taught how to sing in their language. They needed to be taught how to give. They needed to be taught, men needed to be taught, and we're going to talk about that. But obviously, it comes to baptizing. And I like to include this in my presentation because I think baptizing in America and what you would find in Africa, we've given everybody a turn to baptize someone because, I get a kick out of making the brethren getting some of those crocodile waters and baptize. I know Nicky, Ben, yes, he got in there. We didn't tell you, but we made him get in the crocodile water and baptize some people. And Terry and Max and all of them have done it. And baptizing is a little bit different in Africa because the rule of thumb is that every bit of mass of water has crocodiles, especially in those villages, especially off into the bush. So we'd normally have lookouts. You can't see them to the side that would check if there's any crocodiles, throw rocks at them, chase them, and we'd baptize. And we normally take the confession on dry ground. And then we get in the water and we baptize and we get out of there. Botswana is off in the desert, so that's completely opposite to Zimbabwe. And it has its own challenges where there is no water. We're operating in a desert. So if somebody chooses to be baptized, we have now this portable baptistry, but you can see that the water has to go and be collected. That's my pickup, and those are the drums that we're collecting water with. So typically if somebody wanted to be baptized, we'd first have to ask the chief permission because there'd be one tap in the whole village, and they're limited on water. So now you're going to a great resource and you're asking them that you want drums of this water which you're going to put into a baptistry, and you're going to baptize someone and you're going to throw it out. And there has been times when we've come into the village and they said, sorry, there's no water today. So we've had to go back the next day to baptize people. So it's a challenge to get the baptistry up and then to fill it with water. And then the second challenge, or one of the challenges in Botswana, is because a lot of these people originate from the sand people of the sand tribes in Botswana. They don't know water. They don't know masses of water at all. They know a cup of water. So they've never, ever been submerged in water. And so now when you're explaining to them, and this is through a translator, that we're going to dip you in water and we're going to submerge you in water, we've had some interesting baptisms. I know that we've come up with a few. As you can see, I think Brother Max came up with this one. I can't remember. We've got them to hold their own hand, and that way they can't start fighting you and start grabbing onto the sides and grabbing onto the rope that's across there to stabilize the baptistry. But just interesting facts, things that you might not think of when you're working in the bush in Africa. Part of my work, brethren, is since these areas are so vast and so wide apart, is it's important when we establish a congregation to have continuation. And that means training the men to take the lead and to carry on, to do the song leading, to do the preaching. Dowland Road's very much involved in this and come across every couple of years. These are just some of the men, but they get involved because I'm not the only African preacher that you guys are supporting. There's many areas. I mean, Botswana and Zimbabwe together is the size of Texas. So there's a lot of areas that get covered. But it's important that men are trained and brethren are taught how to worship and to continue in this worship, because as we know, the Lord's work is bigger than any one person. And this needs continuation no matter who's there. And so this is what we participate in. I would, on a monthly basis, get some of the men together, and every other year, when Max and them are not there, I would specifically work with the men in my area and do some preacher training and just do some general training. I love the stuff we're doing today. I want to get that from you on conversations, because I think that's fascinating, and it's so true, to teach men and leaders in the church how to communicate. As I said earlier, the Lord's Supper. This is me preparing the Lord's Supper on a Sunday morning worship. It's the same. Nothing's different. Same emblems. We're still breaking the bread and we're taking the fruit of the vine. And although their Bible might be in a different language, it teaches exactly the same thing. Yeah, some of the times we're together teaching them some singing. Most of everything is done through translators. I know a bit of the language to get around, but it becomes difficult when you're teaching in Bible terms. In fact, in Botswana, because you're dealing with a blank piece of paper there, they haven't been influenced, which is wonderful in one way. They haven't been influenced by any outside religion. But in another way, you've got to get brethren to come all the way up until baptism, to start teaching them, And what do I teach them? Do I teach them baptism first? No. I teach them Jesus, just as Philip and the eunuch were. And then we move on, and then we eventually get to the place of baptism. But we've got to teach them how to worship. And this is done, it takes time, it takes effort. This is over and above just your normal encouragement in having worship services, to teach brethren how to sing and to participate in doing the 5 acts of worship. I'll talk a bit about our brethren and the conditions they're living in, just to give you some background. That's just another picture. I guess you'll never see that in a worship service in America. Anything from a chicken or a turkey or a goat can walk across while you're busy giving your lesson. So that's just how we gather together. You can see there's a gentleman passing around the Lord's Supper. So as I said, nothing's different. Let's talk a bit about our brethren and how they live in Africa. Basically, most brethren are living in village conditions. A village condition, you would stay in a hut or a house. Village life is tough. It's poor. There's no running water. It's very isolated. There's no electricity. And most of their homes are built out of things they can find that are within the area. It's trees, sticks, mud, grass. Nowadays, you're even seeing brethren bake bricks out of clay, and they might build out their houses out of bricks. But those are the conditions they stay in. And they are very, very basic needs and very, very basic ownership of any goods. That's inside a hut. That would be a typical bed inside a hut that you would go in and sleep. And the huts are mainly used just to sleep. They're basically living outside most of the time, and everything is done outside. And you would go into your hut if there was weather, and you would go into your hut to sleep. Good news story. This is a good news story. The Lord's answered our prayers, and I don't want to encroach on my drought section, but this is what it should look like. When brethren look after themselves in the village, they participate in subsistence farming. So they typically grow a small, maybe half an acre of crops, which is normally corn. And they do wheat and they do sorghum, but it's normally corn, and they would grow these crops. They rely solely on rainfall. There is no irrigation system. There is no ways of watering these crops, so they would solely rely on rainfall. So when it doesn't rain, they don't eat. And when they harvest their crops, brethren, they will take a lot to use for themselves, and what's left over they would either sell or barter to get other goods, whether it's a bit of clothing, whether it's trying to pay for some kids' schooling or whatever it is. Farming is done the hard way. When I drive here, I know this is the country of John Deere. We've got some John Deere tractors over in Africa. They don't have that luxury. Everything's done by hand. There you've got some oxen pulling a plow. Normally it takes 3 people, one person holding the plow, one person getting the oxen going, and there's, you can't see it in this picture, but in front there's normally somebody leading the oxen. So it's hard work to plant your crops. The brethren are lazy sitting around waiting for someone just to hand out something and pay. They work hard and they plant their crops, and when it's good times, crops are harvested. This is corn on the cob. We call it maize. I know you call it corn, yeah? And this is typically after a harvest. They would gather it all together. There we have some of the ladies, which would be their job, would be to sort. Once the corn's been scratched off the cob, they would sort it and get rid of the bad ones and the dirt and the stones and whatever's in between it. And then it would be crushed by hand into a fine powder, which we call mealie meal, which is the closest I've seen here as grits. And this is their stable diet. This is what they eat only. If they're lucky, they might grow a bit of spinach or something similar to that, and they would make a soup with that, and they would dip the grits. The grits is a lot firmer. They would roll it into a ball, and they would dip it into that, and that's what they would eat. And that's their staple diet. There's a picture of it being cooked in a pot. These are all cast iron pots. All cooking, all kitchen work, ladies, is done on the outside fire. There's no wash-up dishes. There's no dishwashers and anything just at your disposal. If you want water, you walk down to the river and you gather water, you put it on your head, and you bring it back and you wash your pots. That's a typical kitchen in Africa. So as I said, all the cooking, everything is done outside, and mainly always done by the ladies. Transportation, that's an interesting one in Africa. Transportation is either by, we have some oxen, or they typically also have donkeys pulling carts, and that's basically how they're getting around. Roads are bad, so those tend to work better, but it's hard. If you want to go somewhere, it's a day's trip. It's not just quickly go in and go out. And so they would typically go with oxen if they need to load something. Otherwise, they walk. I have brethren that will walk in 8-9 miles to come to worship service on a Sunday, and they're on time most of the time. We've got a thing there we call African time, but we've got that sorted out. But they walk it in, and they're there, and they worship, and they're happy. They're excited to be there. They're excited when I come to share the word of God with them. And the only reason I cut myself off is because I've got other works to go to. Max and that have been there. We're on schedule, and we're moving, and we're going to the next congregation and the next congregation, so we can try and cover all of them in the 4 or 5 day period. But if they wanted to, they would sit there all day, and they would listen to you, and they would ask questions, and they have honest hearts. They want to learn about the Lord. They want to know. I love the scripture in Ephesians. They find out what pleases the Lord. And that's what they're doing. And it's such a, I'm using this word, humble. It's a humble experience to see people really hungering and thirsting for the word of God. That's an example of what the ladies would do. Ladies, you've got to have a strong neck if you're going to live in Africa. because you would carry everything on your head. From a 20-gallon drum of water. I know some of you that are coming in to join us for the potluck, I know Ivy's got a lot more pictures. You're welcome to have a look at it. We just limited to what we can put up, but hundreds of pictures, but they typically carry water. They'll either be the young girls' jobs or this is an old lady. And they would carry it on their heads, and they do that from young, and they walk with it, and they balance it. Don't know how, but they can get it done. Children of Africa. You know, a child is an innocent. Innocent. And it's always wonderful to work with children in Africa. I know that everyone that's ever joined me on my trips have the thrill of working with these children. Ivy loves to work with the children. I know Dowland Road, and I haven't got a picture of it, but a couple of years ago, did a blanket drive, which Ivy headed up, and she made sure that every one of these children got a blanket. And then she went a step further and gave every one of the brethren a blanket. And there's some pictures of that. And then recently, I know a lot of the ladies did. Now, I called it a beanie, and Lisa looked at me like she didn't know what I was talking about, but a knitted hat or a beanie that a lot of the ladies knitted those, and we gave them out to the children, and they were thrilled. So it's always lovely to work with the children. Children very poor, have nothing to look forward to, but they're friendly, and they're always smiling, and they're just such a pleasure and a joy. I want us to take just a few minutes, and I'm not going to say anything, and I just want us to take in some of these slides that you're going to see about the children, and children sitting in the congregation. Have a look of what children in Africa have. Notice the clothing. It's not uncommon for very young children to take care of their baby brother or sister. Yeah, we have a young child looking after his little sister on his lap. Typically, children have no toys to play with. They have nothing. They have no access. Ivy has done a couple of toy drives amongst our local community and tried to help them. But they will make use of what they have. And here we have a young boy. He's made himself a soccer ball, which is normally a bunch of rags tied together. And he's got a stocking, which we would call a stocking, tied around it. And then you'll see here, he's made himself a soccer net out of a whole lot of rags. And look at the smile on his face. He's quite happy. He's happy to play with that soccer ball, and they enjoy their life, and they are friendly, and they are content. There's some pictures of young ladies already. Those are those water. Those drums are filled with water. So you can imagine how heavy that is on the top of your head. And it would be their job to go down and to gather the water. And typically the young men, and talking from the age of 11, 12 up into 15, the responsibility to go gather in the livestock. So it's not that they've got lots of livestock. They'll typically have 1 oxen or 2 oxen because they need it to plow. And that would be their job. So from very young, they are responsible, and they're involved, and they do their work, and they do it with a smile. There's some pictures of Ivy in Botswana. Ivy participates a lot in teaching the children. I know this is her passion, and she's a great asset to my work, because a lot of time we're so busy doing the other things that it's not always easy to isolate the children on their own and directly deal with children. And Ivy, I think, has been a great asset in this, where she's photostats some handouts, and she regularly teaches the children about the Bible stories. And they love it. They love the Bible. We can be 300, 400 yards away, and when they see our vehicle approaching, the children are already running to come and see Ivy. Max will tell you it's definitely not me, it's Ivy they're coming to see. But they love her, and she does a very good job, and I'm very blessed to have a wife that participates in the Lord's work. There you can see a young man holding his hand out. that Ivy's handed them out. I don't know if I know Ivy's seen some of these pictures. I was warned not to put any bad pictures up, but I've just taken the pictures I could find. There's Ivy handing out some crowns. That was another thing that some of the Dowland children sent over and helped send funds to buy crowns, which she would hand each child one color. And then they would on their own swap out colors and color it all in. And then when we returned the next morning, they were very proud and come and show Ivy what they had colored in. Brethren, I'd like to talk a bit about the drought, and just to first of all thank you, and also just to give you some more insight on exactly what was happening in Africa over the last 2 years. As I've said, we're so thankful. It's a good story. The drought's over. It's rained, and in fact, Zimbabwe's had more rain than South Africa. In some places, it ended up flooding, but they've had beautiful rains. They've harvested their crops. They harvested their crops from sort of the end of May right up till June. Brethren are eating. Brethren are happy. Their shoulders, you can just see in their body language, it's just a different type of person there. But first of all, the drought in Africa has been the worst drought experienced in, I think they said 60 years. And it was right across the southern part of Africa, South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe. And as I said, that brethren rely on rain to grow their crop. If they don't have rain, they don't eat. And I want to take a minute to say thank you very much. I'll show you some of these are just some of the pictures. But thank you very much for helping. I know the brethren there haven't got a voice. And the one message they sent me said, please, 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 tell the brethren, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to your elders and the men that were involved in distributing the funds that you've been giving. And you can see where they're going. Brethren, you saved their lives. And I say this with an honest heart, that a lot of people live to get that one bag of maize that you helped supply. And without that help, we would have had tragedy in Africa. And we helped our brethren, and I'm happy to say not one of our brethren died of starvation. And that was because of you. And as I said in the beginning, this is our work. This is your fellowship. This is what you've been involved with. Your elders are directing the work and the funds. This is it. This is what's helped. You know, we read in Corinthians how they helped. And our brethren in Botswana and Zimbabwe were so shocked that there's brethren like you that have so much love and charity that you're willing to help them and you don't even know them. I handed Brother Terry an envelope, and I'm sure he will distribute it with a whole lot of thank you letters that were handwritten by some of I couldn't bring them all. I mean, I had loads of it. Personally thanking the Dowland Road for the help of helping with drought relief to save them. And you must remember when you're reading those letters that English is not their first language, so you'll have to maybe make out what they're saying. There might even be one or two letters there in Shona or Tswana, but thank you very much, brethren. You're going to see a few slides. What I typically did is I took the funds, they were given to me. I'm honored to be your messenger. Honored to be your messenger, because you don't get to see. I'm sorry, the slide's a bit dark, but you don't get to see the smiles and the laughter and the joy when you start to hand out this maize meal to the brethren. Look at this lady there. And that bag, I'm not sure in pounds, but it's about a 10 kg, which is about 20 pounds. That's what they'll use for the whole month. And typically they'll eat one meal a day to stay alive. So it's by no means we were going in there and giving them McDonald's or some great meal. We were giving them one bag of maize. When I started out with the drought relief, a bag of maize cost $12 per person, and that fed that person for the month. We ended up, as it got more intense, as maize meal got less available, it ended up going up to nearly $14 a bag. And with restrictions, especially into Zimbabwe, we weren't allowed to carry maize through the borders, so we had to purchase maize in Zimbabwe. So it had its challenges, and it made it tough on me, but I was happy to be your messenger. We would typically go in, and then you go to the supplier, and you're limited on how many bags you can carry, and then you carry it out to the brethren and help them, and then go back with the pickup, and then load the next load, and go to the next lot. So it would add at least 2 days onto my trips just handing out the maize, but it was a good work that you were involved with, and the brethren were truly, truly grateful for what you contributed to help them in this time of distress. These are just some pictures of handing out the maize, some of the conditions, and to see that your funds were spent correctly and entrusted to me as your messenger, and I entrusted it to faithful brethren. I think I need to make one point, is that we never went around at any time and handed everybody some cash. Otherwise, we would be inundated with hundreds of people. I encourage accountability, and I encouraged the men that were leading these congregations, have a register. Make sure that the faithful members are getting this maize, because I know that's what was entrusted to me, and I wanted to pass that on. And they did. They were very, very diligent in keeping a register and making sure that the maize went to faithful members that have been around years, members with needs. And not everybody had a need. There would be occasional lady that would have a husband that was working in South Africa, and they were distributing it correctly. They just didn't give everybody a bag because it was there. They said, all right, the preachers didn't get, because they're getting supported. And they bought their own maize. So it was important that you realize that we didn't just go out willy-nilly handing out maize and hoping people would. We would test these brethren. We knew that the brethren getting these maize was faithful brethren. And we're happy to say it was a great success. Even though the challenges were there, my vehicle has taken a beating in the last 2 years carrying this maize over those roads, because I'd have to load it to its limit every time. And so that vehicle of mine did take a bit of a beating. And you're going through these roadblocks with this maize, not easy. You're a target. When I'm going into Zimbabwe, I'm carrying a lot of cash. I'm going to the same supplier all the time. They know me. They know the pickup. But the Lord is with us. I've never had a problem. I had a few little issues, but never anything serious. If we look in the book of Matthew chapter 28, verse 19 and 20, and Brother Max quoted it this morning, it says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things I've commanded you, and lo, I'm with you always till the end of age." We read in Matthew that we have a responsibility. Max says we have marching orders. I like that. We have marching orders to go and teach the nations. And you, brethren, have shared in these marching orders. You've helped me help brethren. And I'm honored to be able to have the opportunity to do this, to go and teach the nations. Without your support, this would never be possible. In verse 20, which I find very important, it says there at the end of it says, teaching them to observe all things. It's one thing going in there and baptizing people, but we need to teach them how to be Christians. We need to teach them how to worship. We need to teach them about the Lord and salvation and going to heaven and to continue. I think in Acts chapter 20, we read about them continuing in the apostles' doctrine. And brethren, this is what my aim is as an evangelist, is to get brethren to go to heaven. And that's because of you. Let's continue. It says in Matthew 9:37-38, then he said to the disciples, the harvest is truly plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of harvest to send out laborers. And once again, privilege to be out there, humbling to be out there and to have an attentive harvest to go and sow the seed, to go and reap. We have baptized, in the last years that we've been dealing, we have over 500 brethren, and that's excluding their family. Those are the men we're talking across Zimbabwe and Botswana, just in my area. And that's a result of you sending out somebody to go and preach. None of that would be possible without your help. Acts chapter 11, verse 22. Then the news of these things came to the ears of the church in Jerusalem, and they sent out Barnabas to go as far as Antioch. As I said, you sent me out, and I always will be very humbled and grateful for the opportunity of being sent out to go into the villages, to go and teach the nations, and to convert them to Christ, and to then, it was never our intention to go out and help brethren. We know we have the responsibility, but then you guys go a step further. You go and help these brethren in their time of need, and you'll see a lot of those letters. I've read through a few of them. I never got through all of them. One person said, we've learned from your charity. You've taught us about love. You've taught us about charity. And I think that in itself just speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. I saw in one of the letters where a guy said, his English was, he says, I was about to touch the sky when I received my milli meal. That's just in their broken English. And brethren, you can truly be proud of the work. You can be proud of what you've done. You can be proud of your elders and your men leading this congregation, sending out, being involved, and continually. This wasn't just once off. This has been 15 years of good support and good charity, good love. It's just an example, and we really, really appreciate it. Philippians chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica, you sent aid once and again for my many necessities. And brethren, that's you. That's you. Sending out, helping me, helping these brethren, helping Africa, get the word out there. Doesn't matter what challenges we have. I know that with an email, thank goodness for technology, but with an email, I've got Max, I've got Terry, I've got Ben, I've got Brother Ulysses, Clara, all the men. I don't want to single out any. That are always willing to find out what can we do, how can we help, how can we fix this. Just some needs in the work that you need to be aware of. I never expressed any needs over the last 2 years because the need was food. The need was to eat. But one of the big needs in Africa continually is Bibles. We need to buy these Bibles in their own language. When you're teaching people to observe, we need them to have a Bible. A lot of brethren are sharing Bibles. The work's growing. A couple of years ago, I know the young people helped contribute towards Bibles here, which they're still using. Bibles get wear and tear out in the open. They don't last as long as when you're keeping them in the building. Songbooks. I copy it. I know Clarence at one stage and the brethren did do a couple of songbooks, but we worked out it was actually easier and cheaper just to copy them there and put them together there and hand them out there than to try ship them across. That is a need. And then, brethren, I need to replace my pickup. As I said, I've done 180,000 miles in that pickup. It's been, and like Terry said to me, that's not interstate miles. Those are Zimbabwe miles. So you can times it by 3 because it's over those roads. It's with a heavy load. I had an issue. I've had 3 issues with my pickup in Zimbabwe. You cannot afford to get stopped there. I had a problem with the diff, which I had to nurse the vehicle back. I had a problem with the alternator. So small things are starting to go now, and that's because of the heavy roads. And the type of vehicle I'm driving there it's very basic, very, very basic, but very expensive. In South Africa, everything is loaded and doubled, and we've got import duties, and it's very expensive to buy pickups. It's very expensive to maintain them. It's very expensive to buy tires. So those are the needs that are out there for the Africa work. And I hope that this short time I've spent with you has given you a bit of insight. First of all, giving you some idea of what's happening over there, giving you an idea of where your money is being spent and the good work your elders and yourselves have been doing. And once again, in closing, just like to say thank you very, very much for everything you do. Amen.
Would you please stand? While on earth